have any type of questions, please feel free to use the Q&A rather than the chat feature. And then that way it will be more easier for us to answer those questions along the way.
Actually, there's no Q&A option right now. You can do it
Not a
in the
problem.
chat, and I will help Jody field the questions.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to continue on. All right, so last week we actually did a basic resume. And so with that basic resume, that was a previous webinar. It is available on our YouTube channel. So if you notice here on the right-hand side, this is what the basic resume covered. So if you're here thinking, I'm going to go over just the basics of what is skills, what is education, how to put the work experience, definitely go back into our YouTube channel and watch this one. And this will help you tremendously with just creating the basics. Now, this is beyond the basics. And the main reason why is because we're going to be talking a little bit more into detail about really creating that resume to being a marketing tool. We want it to be more than. We're wanting it to really shine and be put at the top of the list to get that interview. This is a document that's highlighting your qualifications for that specific job. It's also tailored so well that it aligns your skills with a professional. And so I'm going to show you exactly how to do all of those variations. And then also it's industry appropriate. So definitely do your research on the actual job industry, also research on the company itself. And you could even look at other resumes. A lot of times on LinkedIn, professionals within that area will indeed actually post their resumes. So you could definitely align your resume with someone who's doing the job itself. All right, so the attributes employers seek on students' resumes is this. So a lot of times when we start thinking about, all right, what should I put on? Regardless of industry, this is actually from NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And this will basically kind of give you an idea of, all right, should I incorporate this throughout my experience within my qualifications? Yes, most definitely. We want to be able to see that you are team orientated, that you could work on a team, that you could problem solve, that you have good communication skills. I would say that is the number one thing that our employers here at Fresno State really comment on, is that our students' lack of communication skills. And so communication skills in the written form, so making sure that that resume is up to par with no grammatical errors, but also being able to verbalize your skills and abilities and articulate it to them in a career fair setting. So if you notice, there's the majority of it, if you look at anything that's 50 or above, that's detail orientated and above. So these are areas that really need to be highlighted on your resume throughout. The other aspect is when we start looking at how an employer looks at a resume, how are they really reviewed? And this becomes imperative when you start having those two-page resumes. Is a two-page resume going to be the fault of not being able to get that interview? Sometimes, depends on the industry. Most industry prefers one page, but then you start going, how can I format that to make sure that I'm emphasizing my experience where they're actually reviewing it? So when we start thinking about how we actually review a resume, employers will take about 7 seconds to maybe a minute, but it's typically closer to that 7 to 30 seconds just to decide whether or not you have the skills and the abilities that they're looking for, the qualifications. And if you don't have those qualifications right up close to the front, what's going to happen is you might get put in the no pile. So when you start thinking about where should I put really good information at, it is definitely not going to be this first quadrant. That is a no. You do not want to put it in that very first quadrant. And the main reason why is because if you put it at that down bottom quadrant, that is the least possible place that an employer is going to review, actually look and spend time within those first seconds. The other part is that top right-hand quadrant. So if you take your resume and you fold it into half, lengthwise, and you actually fold it in half, what's going to happen is you're going to say, okay, this is what the employer is basically going to see, because they're going to be skimming it. Think about when you skim a chapter before an exam. You're just looking at the first couple of words of each sentence or each bullet and say, yeah, I got the gist, and you go to the next one. So that's the exact same thing that they're doing with a resume. Very quickly, they're reviewing it. And so you really want everything to be on that left-hand side, but what should be on that right-hand side? When you start thinking about what should be over there, think about your dates, right? Because you don't want them to sit there and think, okay, well, they did this for 3 months, this for 5 months. This looks like it maybe been maybe a couple of weekends. You don't want them to look at that. Instead, you want them to focus on your skills and abilities all the way down. So the number one prime real estate of all resumes is ultimately this first quadrant. So fold your resume in half again after you do it landscape, and that little baby quadrant is where you need to sell yourself the most, because this is where the first 7 seconds happens. This is where they decide whether or not they're going to continue looking down for the rest of your resume. So on here, those minimum job qualifications that they're seeking, you have to have a bachelor's degree. That needs to be within that first quadrant. The same thing is if they're looking for a certain skill or ability. That's why sometimes it's good to put that qualifications section right on top. So that's what they're seeing immediately, because that's in the first quadrant. All right, so an element of an effective resume. A lot of times students will ask, okay, do I need to put everything on here? No, it's definitely not. But there are some that has to be on there. Your contact information needs to be on there. That was in the basic that goes over into greater detail. An objective professional summary, I'm going to be going over, or a qualification summary. Your education relevant coursework is a maybe. Projects could be a maybe. Industry specific skills, that's probably a definite, because you want to show that you're aligning yourself with a professional. But that honors and awards, the campus involvement, that's a maybe. So not everything needs to go on there. If you indeed put every single bullet that's listed here, you're going to have probably a 2-page resume. And as I said before, a 1-page is more typical for most industries than not. If you're going into the educational realm, a 2-page is fine, because within the educational realm, that's a K-12 or higher education, we're used to reading, right? So we definitely could handle that 2-page, even a 3-page. But if you're going into any type of business or healthcare, they prefer just a 1-page. And so it is a true marketing. It's basically really showing exactly what skills and abilities you have for that single job. All right, so is an objective needed? So this is that, oh, I have to have an objective. If you look at old templates or even current templates, they always throw an objective on there. The thing about it, the basic thing about an objective is objectives were created decades ago, especially before digital what was a thing. Ultimately, years ago, when you applied for a position, you typed it up on a typewriter, you put it in a manila envelope because you didn't want to fold it, and then you mailed it off with a cover letter. And we just prayed that it did arrive there through snail mail. But the fear was, if we dropped it, if your cover letter got separated from your resume, they needed to know what position you were applying to. So that's why the objective came about. Now, if you think about the digital world now, when you apply to a position, it's usually, if they have an application, it's all date stamped within, this is the position you're applying to. If you are emailing it to an individual, in the subject matter, you're saying, this is the position I'm applying to. So that fear of, oh, my resume is going to go away from where I'm applying to is no longer there. So an objective is no longer needed. And if you think about where that's located at, that's at prime real estate, that first quadrant, you're going to be wasting about 2 lines there to say objective, and then listing a 1 or 2 lines. So that could be 3 lines of saying, yes, by the way, I know you just read my cover letter and I'm applying to this XYZ position, but in case you have a short attention span, yeah, I'm applying to the XYZ position. It's redundant. It's really not needed. Now, if you do want to put something up there and you want to look like, wow, I do have the skills and abilities you're looking for. And this is also a time that if you're saying, I really don't want to include a cover letter, most rule of thumb is you always include a cover letter because they'll read it. But if you're really saying, I don't want to put a cover letter, I'm just maybe going to a career fair and I just want to highlight the skills and abilities that I have, and also putting in that personal touch, that's when you would do a professional summary. This is an extremely short paragraph, maybe 3 to 4 sentences max. You don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's really identifying your unique personality as a professional. And the way that you would do this is it's at the bottom here, meticulous and motivated student. So you're saying you're meticulous and motivated. You're typically unable to say that on a resume, but this is the time that you can say it. Now, if you noticed, I didn't start off with I am, because no I, me's, or my's are on a resume. It's all about you. So try to keep it from the first person and don't write it as a third person, because that's just kind of weird to say your name in a third person on a resume. So meticulous and motivated student working towards a BS in business administration marketing, eager to join ABC Media as a junior SEO researcher. So you're basically saying this is the position I'm applying to produce data-driven outreach marketing campaigns. And then it goes on previous 3-month internship experience. This may or may not be needed in a professional summary because that could be under your qualification. Same thing with the other one, analyze 10,000 plus URLs to identify the top 100 domains. So that too could be also in your qualifications. But if you're wanting to put it at the front where this is something you're very proud about and you want them to definitely read it, that could definitely go at the very top under your professional summary. So definitely take a time and look at this, rewrite it. This is going to change for every single position you're applying to. There's no way of just tweaking it. Typically, you have to start from scratch because you're looking at the industry itself, you're looking at the company's needs, and then you're also aligning your skills and abilities with that.
Hi, Jody.
Yes.
There's a question about whether they should include an objective for their resume for the career fair. So
All right,
just wanted to clarify that.
Oh yeah, not a problem. So the thing about objectives for a career fair, if what I've seen students do, if you want to print up a lot of different resumes for the career fair, because let's say you're a PR person. Well, public relations could also go a face-to-face PR, a PR for a large corporation, a health organization, an education organization. You might be doing more social media within that PR. You might be doing only written PR. It's really hard to just say, this is what I'm looking for. Instead, you're going to have to rephrase it a little bit. So sometimes it's good not to include an objective, even for a career fair, because what's going to happen is a lot of employers will look at it and start making their little notations on it up in the corner of your resume. So they're going to put down what they feel is a good fit for you. And you don't want to sit there and say, okay, well, I really want to work for a large corporation. And then when you go to our career fair, you'll find a lot of local companies come and they're on the smaller side. But on your objective, you put down that you're looking forward to working for a large corporation or a global corporation like PepsiCo. And now you've just put yourself out of the market because all these smaller businesses here in Fresno might be going, you know what, they're really wanting to work for a large company and not necessarily us. They'll give you, they'll speak with you, but they know that's not your ultimate goal. So in my opinion, I'd say don't put an objective even on that, because that way you could print up a lot of resumes and it could work for any place that you might be handing it to, instead of going, oh, I only have my old ones that's for this type of job. And ultimately, after you talk with an employer also, you might find out that there's other opportunities that you're qualified for, and that won't even be in your objective. So I would say just leave it off. All right, so summary of skills and qualifications is a really cool section because this is like your synopsis. So here's my resume. There's a lot of things that you could be reading about, but this is going to be later on. Instead, I'm going to quickly tell you what you're going to be seeing. And this is a way to really make that recruiter or the committee member that's doing the hiring or the HR person very happy, because now you've done their job for them and you're really saying, here is my most outstanding skills relevant to the job. And that's the biggest key, is it's relevant to that job. So you have to look at that job description. You're going through, you're looking at it, you're verifying that this qualification section is really aligning with what the job is saying, and you're doing it most relevant to least relevant. So every single section is most relevant to least relevant. So most job announcements is written the same way, the most important to the least important on that job announcement. So that's the order that you're going to put your qualifications in. The other thing is quantify whenever possible. So a lot of times students might be part of a club and they do event planning. So they've done a lot of delegation and project management type of things because that's part of event planning. But if you've done an event planning for 20 versus 100, there's a big difference between that. So make sure that you quantify whenever possible. So sample qualification. So if you're applying to an internship from step-by-step program, and it looks like this. So this is what they're really looking for. I'm looking for someone who has 1 year of working with individuals with developmental disabilities, a self-starter. So you read this and you're thinking, I could definitely do this job. So the way that you do this at is when you create that qualification summary, you look at it and they say, okay, I want 1 year of working with individuals. Yeah, I have 2 years of working. So you're lining up exactly with that job announcement. This person had 6 years of retail sales associate experience. So that's good customer service. Now, you really don't see customer service on there, but every single industry, there's a customer. If it's an education, the student is a customer. If it is a normal business, it's the consumer that is the buyer is the customer. So customer service comes through everything. So that's fine to put down. Client management and motivated to provide leadership while being a contributing team member, because it's like, all right, well, you're going to be working within a team. You have to be a self-starter, quickly create working relationships with parents, because it does state that you have to be able to work with family dynamics. So you're aligning all of your skills with that job announcement. So that kind of gives you an idea of how you go about to do that. Now, there is another section called relevant coursework. And this is a section that some students put on there and some students choose to leave off. Now, the benefit of coursework is you have to look at coursework as training. You go into a class not knowing very much about that class and that subject matter. So you're actually taught via the book, class discussions, and additional material. So you're training. So you've been trained in this. You learn about it, you're tested on it, you learn more about it, you're tested on it. Sometimes you have some type of hands-on component to it, and then you have one final test at the end, your final. So you've been trained in these areas. So for this person who's the MCJ and broadcast multi-platform, these are the relevant coursework. So do I have to list all coursework? No. Can I butcher the names a little bit and take off like introductory too? Yes, you could definitely do that. Like this, and even this first one, reporting and media performance, that's actually 2 classes that's been blended into one. So it doesn't have to be the exact name of the class, but pretty darn close to it. The reason that you do this is because you've been trained in all of these areas, but sometimes you've never had the opportunity to apply it outside of the classroom. And there's also this really cool thing that's happening is what we call ATS, which is the applicant tracking software. So this is artificial intelligence, AI at its best. So what happens is your resume will go into a holding tank, and this software system will basically look for key terms. And if you match those key terms to a certain percentage that the employer is seeking, then you will be actually looked by a human being. If you don't have that percentage, then you'll never be seen by anybody, and you'll just get that rejection letter, say thank you, but no thank you, or you might never hear anything back from them at all. So you never know if they're going to be using ATS. So it's really imperative on your part to make sure that you're putting all those key terms in, especially if it's at the job qualifications that they're wanting somebody that has done on this one filmmaking. Well, you may have never done anything other than your class, but you're trained to do it. You're able to do it quite well, but you've never been able to apply it outside of the classroom setting. So that's why relevant coursework is pretty important. You could always stick it right below your California State University Fresno section. So your education section, you can list it right there, or you could create its own header, a larger header, and just say relevant coursework. Never just put a long grocery list, comma, 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 because sometimes that doesn't get picked up as well with the ATS. If you do bullets, it's going to be picked up a little bit more. And it also allows the reader who's actually looking at it could see it very clearly, because if it is a comma, 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 a grocery list, what happens is we'll read a couple of words in and go, yeah, I got the gist, and we'll move on. And you want to make sure that If it is bullets, don't do all solid line, do some column borders, so do like 2 or maybe 3 columns, so to allow it to put some dimension into your resume also. All right, so now if we're talking about experience, so on experience, think of the skills that you have developed along the way to put on that resume. When you're actually looking at that job description and you're saying, I could definitely do this, take a step back and say, how do I know that I could do this? And also, how have I applied it? Where have I learned the skill? And then you're separating things up because there are experience that are related experience. And then there's like, let's say you're an engineering. So your engineering experience. And those could be your projects, because you could even say engineering project experience. Your work experience. A lot of times people will put work experience, but work experience always means paid experience. But not all experience is paid, unpaid, it doesn't matter. Professional experience. So it aligns really well with that profession and with that industry. Leadership experience, where you've taken the lead of things, and then also volunteer experience, and then there's other experience. Other experience is basically that experience that paid the bills along the way. We've done a lot of things that have nothing to do with our future goal. For example, I was a food server for many years. So under other experience, I listed some of my food experience as a food server and a lead food server. And the reason that I did that is because it gave me work ethic. So they know that I have good work ethic because I've worked all through my education of obtaining my bachelor's degree or my master's degree. They know that I know I know what it's like to actually keep a job for a long period of time. So other experiences that experience that I'm only putting down food server, TGI Fridays, Fresno, California, and the dates, but I'm not putting any bullets down. I'm not explaining what I did. Everybody knows what a food server has done. Everyone knows what someone at CVS as a clerk, what they do. We don't need to elaborate on it. All we're doing is saying, you know what, I do have this experience, because it's work ethic. It's not necessarily aligning with that job at all. Now, is there a time that you stop? Yeah, you don't want to put like 15 different other experiences down. Just put the most recent ones, or the ones that have the longevity aspect. This is a resume. A resume is a marketing tool. This is not something that is uh, you don't have to list everything within the past 10 years. All of my experiences within the past 10 years. No, that's something, if they're really curious about that, they'll make you fill out an application. But that's not what a resume is about. So gaps is okay, especially when you're a new professional. And it's also when a lot of your skills are going to be from experiences that you did only in the summer and during breaks. And there's a lot of breaks along the way. So it's fine to have that not cohesive every single month filled out when you're a new professional. All right, so when we start listing experience, this was covered in the basics, but just in case, the biggest thing is when you do think about how did I perform this, just write it all out in a great big paragraph. And when you start filling out this paragraph, don't worry about I did this, I did that, I did this, just write it all out. And then you pull out the bullets. It's really important to have the bullets, because on here you have the title, the organization name, the city, the state, the months and dates. And then these would be bullets. The bullet starts with a power verb. What is a power verb? It's basically an action verb, but it gives your resume power. That's why we call it a power verb. And so it's like designed, created, initiated, like it states up there. So if I say designed, so my power verb is designed, how did I complete the designing aspect? How did I complete that action? And then the results and outcome. What that is an accomplished statement. Now, instead of a duty, these are my job duties. It's really focusing on what am I bringing to the table for this job? What have I accomplished in the past? That's why doing this way with the power verb, how I completed that action, the end result, really allows the reader to get the full picture. And on those power verbs, in this book, this Career Success Guide is available on our website as a PDF, or you could even come into our office and we still have some copies. You could definitely do that, because we do have 2 pages of just verbs that you could pull from. And so each bullet should start off with a different verb, because it does tell a story. If you keep saying the exact same thing over and over, it really doesn't tell a story. But instead, if you said, I addressed, I argued, I briefed, I clarified, I corresponded, created, debated, defined, expressed, that's all under communication. rather than I spoke with, I did this, so rather than saying the exact same thing over and over, or I was responsible for, you really want to start just with that action verb, and it will tell a story along the way, which is really good for the reader, especially if they're only reading it very quickly and they're going to read a couple of words in. They know, they get the full gist of what you're bringing. All right. So the other area is when we start looking at the job description, it's really important to start tailoring that job description. So if you're applying to a PR representative position and it shows, okay, here's the job responsibilities. This is what I want you to do. And I know it sounds really old school, but there's a reason for it. Print it up. And the main reason why is I get all these horror stories from students that say, well, I did a screenshot of it and it's no longer, and I accidentally deleted it, or I saved it and it's no longer there because they took it off the website that I found it on. Because once they have the applications, a lot of times that those job descriptions, they take off those sites. So you can no longer find them. So it's really important to maybe do old school, but if you do a screenshot, try to put it into a folder immediately that says jobs. So you're not going to accidentally delete it. Otherwise, print it up. And the main reason I like printing it up is because then I now have a document that when I get called for that interview, I know exactly what I'm studying for, because these are the questions they're going to be asking me is based off the job description. So I look at this and I go, okay, now I need to pull out all of those buzzwords, all of those industry words that I need to make sure is on my own resume. So when we start doing that, it looks like, oops, doesn't want to go there. It looks like this. So develop and execute, maintain a positive brand image, strategize, targeting communication, creating, promoting, develop, educational and training meetings. So you pull out all of those key terms, and now you have a go-to to say, okay, are these words actually listed on my resume? Because remember, they might be scanning your resume for key terms. And guess where the key terms are typically coming from? A lot of times the job description. So don't get cutesy and say, okay, what's a different word, and look at the thesauruses. What's a different word than develop? Because if you go too crazy, that's not a word that they put into the software system. So it's easier just to use the words that they actually utilized within the job description. So this will really help your resume become aligned much better with that job that you're applying to. That's why one resume does not really fit all. Now, sometimes students go, well, I'm applying to very similar jobs over and over and over. Great. Then adapt it to this one job, and then the next job, look at it and say, okay, these key terms are already there. Now here's some new key terms. Let's make sure, let's incorporate it. Your resume is only going to get better and better by doing this. Now, if it doesn't have a long job description, that's the problem that most students say, okay, well, I'm just going to send a generic resume. And this is where you end up really not getting that call for that interview, because that's what a resume is for, is to market your skills and abilities to get that interview. But if it doesn't have a long job description, that doesn't mean you don't know what to do with your resume. It doesn't give you that, okay, well, now I could just send my generic resume that's not tailored to anything. But instead, what you want to do is you actually want to utilize these two sites. There's the Occupational Outlook Handbook, and there's also the ONET. And so when you go to these sites, the easiest way to find it is, let's say you want to be an electrical engineer. Go electrical engineer, OOH. You don't even have to spell out Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can just put OOH after whatever job title, and it'll be the first one that comes up. Same thing with the ONET. You could say electrical engineer, ONET, and it will come up as the first one under a Google search. So when you actually go into the Occupational Outlook Handbook, the biggest thing that you want to do is, if you go into this and you start searching, you always want to search in the handbook. So make sure it's part of the Occupational Outlook Handbook, because this is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And when you start looking at this and you actually use that top search bar, which says search bls.gov, you're going to get statistical data which nobody wants to look at. Instead, you really want to stay within the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So that's using the search handbook site. Otherwise, you will get really lost into this. But what's really nice about this is it gives you the overall viewpoint. And what you really want to pull out of, though, is on the first area, you want to look at what they actually do. right? So this will give you those qualifications. So this is good for your qualification, for your experience section. So go ahead and take time to read it. Read the top part, read all of these bullets, because the bullets are basically starts with an action verb, talks about how they completed that action. So it kind of gives you that idea of how an accomplished statement should be written. And these are also things that you could incorporate within your own. I highly suggest not to use a verbatim and just copy paste, because a lot of times it is very similar to what you've done, but try to make it your own every single time. And don't forget to read this bottom part. This bottom part has a lot of good information and could also be incorporated into your resume. The other part of the, let me move my bar here. There we go. The other part that's in the OOH is the important qualities. So when you go into the important qualities, these are areas that could be highlighted in your cover letter if it's a personality trait. Let's say a personality trait could be patience, right? For a teacher, it says patience, resourcefulness. Those are more like personality traits. Great for a cover letter. If it says skills, like all of these state skills, you could put it under qualifications. If you have a skills section, you could put it under there, or you could just incorporate it within your experience. So interpersonal skills, organizational skills, and it kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like in this industry. Now, when we start looking at the next section, oops, sorry about that, I clicked the wrong thing. There we go. So when we click onto the next section, this is the ONET. And so when we start looking at the ONET, this one gives us a little bit more in detail. But it's really cool to go to, because let's say that you are looking for a PR specialist position. You found one, you're like, wow, this is the perfect job. But you want to continue to look at other jobs. They do give sample reported job titles. So you could say, okay, well, I could look at a public affairs specialist. I could also look at a corporate communication specialist or media relations specialist. So it gives you those key terms of other areas that you can look at that is the same job. So on here, how do I utilize this for my resume? So the easiest way is looking at task. Now, each of these has that little plus minus you'll see, and it says all 16 displayed. Some of them, it could be up to 40. Some of them, it could be just 7 or even 5. So the default is always 5 that you're looking at. So make sure if you are going onto the site, you are putting that plus. So you're seeing all of those areas. Now, the same thing, look at it and go, okay, I respond to requests. I do this. So same thing, you're going through and saying, am I really highlighting some of these skills within my own resume? And once again, this is if they don't have a very good job description, but even if they do have a good job description, sometimes it's really good to make sure that you're hitting the mark, because this is how you're aligning with a professional, is by utilizing this, because this is basically looking at professionals doing the job successfully and saying, this is what they do day in and day out. The other area is knowledge. So the knowledge is under qualification section, because I know I need to be knowledgeable in communications and media, English language, administrative and management. So I could pull these key terms and put it under my qualification section. And then lastly, you have skills. So this could be listed in any of those areas, your skills section, your experience section, or your qualification section. And it's already broken down. Now, the biggest thing that I don't want to see, and none of us want to see here when we critique a resume, is having all of these listed. Pick and choose what's most important, looking at the job description, looking at the industry itself, and saying, is this going to be needed? Or can I just include some of these key terms like persuasion, or that you've learned to negotiate within a cover letter, right? Instead of putting it actually on your resume. All right, so additional sections. So when we look at additional sections, this is when you could add like trainings and certifications. So sometimes you have specialized trainings, and that could go under qualifications, but sometimes it gets buried into the qualifications. So if you really want to make it stand out, you create its new header and its own category. So trainings and certifications could be put into there. Now, let's say you only have one, like a CPR. Is a CPR really needed for the job that you're applying to? And can you, because it's only one area, that could probably go under your qualification section. Or is it, if it's not even required, it doesn't necessarily need to be on there. Same thing with honors and awards. This is actually really nice, because it's a history of how you make positive contributions. But if you're pushing and trying to find space for it, and that award was just like Dean's List or President's List, is it really necessary to put on a resume? Probably not if you're going to a second page just to keep that on there, or you're trying to make the font really, really tiny. Font size is basically could go down to as far as a 9, depending on the style. Let's say Arial. Arial's nice and big. Yeah, you could probably go down to a 9. But if you're already using a smaller font, a 9 is microscopic. So the biggest thing is make it at 100%, look at it without glasses on and have other people look at it. And if you yourself are having to squint at it, it's being too small. So don't add some of these. That's why there are additional sections unless you have the space to add it. Another area that you could definitely put on there is professional associations, because professional associations is something that professionals themselves are part of, because this is where we find our best practices. This is also where we could find what's currently happening in this industry. Because if you're learning it from a textbook, that textbook is probably, even if it is by the time it goes through editing and actually gets into your hands or virtually into your hands, it's probably about 1.5 to 2 years old information, even though the date on it could be 2021. So if you actually belong to a professional association, you get to know the blogs of what's happening currently, what people are researching, and you get to know the here and now. And that's sometimes extremely beneficial. So if you go to this one site, just go ahead and take a picture of it, the Career One Stop. If you go to the site, you could search all the different professional associations by key terms, by key names, and you can see all the variations of things that you could actually become part of. As a student, typically a professional association would cost between $20 to $50 a year. $20, I would say, yeah, definitely do it, because that's the price of a pizza, but you get all these opportunities to start networking with professionals already in the field. Maybe you can find a mentor, but it also helps you develop your resume. They also often have a job board listed on there. So definitely take advantage of that. And also community involvement. If you look at most not jobs, but organizations out there, a lot of times their mission statements. Their mission statements will definitely say community involvement. And so they always get back to the community. So having something on there on your own resume is aligning your values with the values of the company. Even if it's just like a one-day thing like this one, Fresno Walk, Autism Speaks, walk participant, you could definitely list that on there if you have the room, right? So it doesn't have to be something that you do like working at the Poverillo House every weekend for the past 3 years. You don't have to put that down unless you truly have done it. But it can be something as small as like the Fresno Walk. Now, reminder, everything that you post online does stay there forever. Always stay professional. So even if you have a very professional resume, avoid damage control, because what happens is the last face-to-face career fair that we had, I walked around and spoke to every single employer here, and I asked them the same question. Do you look and like Google search the candidates? And they all said yes, every single one of them. They were all various industries, because it was the spring one. They all said yes. They all Google search you. So Google search yourself. Google search your name. Google search your email address, your phone number. See what's coming up, because you want to clean it up before you start applying. That's avoiding the damage control. You can't close everything down where, okay, I have zero presence on any social media site. That is more suspicious, because they're actually wanting to see social proof. They look in, they want to see what other people think about you. The easiest one that you definitely want to have up is LinkedIn. We do have a LinkedIn presentation going to be coming up. We also have a lot of information on our website about LinkedIn. So definitely go in there and create a LinkedIn account if you haven't done so. But it's also a way to have social proof in a professional manner. But there are times that you could actually get a job and someone does a Google search on you and find out that you're a Yelper and you're a hater Yelper, wherever you've gone, you've hated. So you're a negative person. So they may end up keeping a closer eye on you, or if you've never been hired yet, they may not choose to hire you because of that negativity aspect. Or on Facebook, you don't know if your friends of friends are the bosses. So close everything down very tightly so they can't see unless it is something that you truly want them to see. Email addresses, you have basically 2 years to keep your Fresno State email, but go ahead and just switch it to a Gmail. That it just looks more professional later on, and you know that you can keep that forever. And the other thing with voicemail messages, when you start sending things out, keep that professional image 100%. So make sure that you check your voicemail message, make sure it sounds like you're not in an airplane because you did it while you're driving down the car, you know, with the windows down. That's usually what I hear the most. But sometimes I do hear, yeah, just leave a message. You really want it to be very professional, and professional does not mean sterile. It doesn't have to say, unfortunately, I'm unavailable to answer the phone right now. No, just say, hi, you've reached so-and-so, please leave a message. That's professional. It doesn't have to sound sterile. So definitely check your voicemail messages when you start sending things out on your resume. And lastly, this is where we're located at. Our semester office hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We have virtual and face-to-face career cafe hours. The virtual is 9 to 3. The link is available on our website. But if you want face-to-face, it's basically anytime that we're open, you could come in. The 8 to 5. And then we're also, go to our website. We have a lot of good information on our website. So that's fresnostate.edu/careers. And then you could contact us through various social media sites to stay up to date of what's happening. All right, so let's go. Does anybody have questions that I have been ignoring? For the experience section, can you adjust the job listing experience to something that related to a job, even if it isn't recent? So that's why you want to change your headers. It's the main reason why you want to change your headers, because the benefit of changing the headers, trying to find my header one, the benefit of changing the headers is, let's say your most relevant experience was 2 years ago, right? So if you say, okay, this is related experience, that could be 2-year-old information, now higher than the relevant experience or current experience, that could be other experience. So you could definitely redo it, but in each section, it has to be most current to the past. So reverse chronological order. That's why you use different headers. And let's see, any other, should I include an objective? We already talked about that one. And I think that is it for the questions. So does anybody else have any other additional questions that I could answer? Because we definitely have time to answer any additional questions. All right, so what if if I have an international experience? International experience is global experience. It's great. So you could actually list it under the title, global experience, and list it on there. Now, let's say that you have an international experience because you did study abroad. You could also list that under your education, and then anything else, because global experience is very desired, because there are a lot of companies that are global. Just think of PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Wells Fargo. There's several that actually come to our campus that have a global presence. If you have gaps in your experience, how would you show that on your resume? Now, as I mentioned before, the benefit of being a new professional, you're going to have gaps. Once you're out into the realm, like let's say after 5 years after you graduate, then they're going to wonder why you have gaps. Why did you take a gap year off after you started your professional career? You took a gap year off and then you started up again. That's more questionable. But as a student, as a new professional, they know you're going to have gaps. They know that things happen. A lot of times students will focus more on internships or just getting those harder classes completed at the end of their education. So they're very used to seeing gaps. Sometimes look at COVID, there's going to be a huge gap time during that because people lost their jobs and the way that they were working changed. And sometimes it couldn't go virtual, so you were let go. And during that time, it is going to show that there's nothing there. That's why if you do different titles and different headers, like this screenshot that I'm showing right now, it's really hard to see those gaps because you're listing related experience, work experience, professional experience, and they could be at all different levels. It's just the most current of that section, most recent of that section is being listed. So you might have something that's 2021 that's on the second set, let's say work experience, related experience was in 2019. And then, so they're unable to really see that there's a gap there. All right, so let's see. How would you list based or freelancing jobs, project-based or freelancing jobs? It's if it's related to that job, you would just put it under related experience. All experience is not paid experience, and not all experience is by an employer. So you could actually just put freelance, and so for the organization, freelance for this company. So you were working for a company, but you were freelancing. It's not a full-time position. And so you can list that in the bullets, and that bullet will allow them to know that's why it was only a 3-month gig. What opinion do I have on no work experience for a career I want to go into, but have work experience? Okay, so I have no work experience for the career, but you do have work experience. So that's when you rely heavily on your class, your actual relevant coursework. You also look at the projects that you did within those coursework. So start keeping a really close eye of what have I applied hands-on, even if it was a class project. In our career success guide, we do have a really good section of resume samples. And if you look at the engineering samples, there is a section on projects. So they do an excellent job of showing that. So you could definitely do the relevant projects in there. You could also, yes, I could send out the PowerPoint. So if you email it, email me, we could definitely give you the PowerPoint. So let's go back to, it's moving as I'm talking. So without the work experience, project-based experience, any volunteer experience. So if you know that, all right, I need to have this experience, I can't find an internship within it, start volunteering and try to find those transferable skills, because if, let's say you want to become a teacher. So how can I gain skills of becoming a teacher without having to work with kids? Well, I could volunteer. I could volunteer in the classroom. I could volunteer. I could job shadow. I could take certain classes here on campus, introductory to teaching, and a lot of drama type of classes for kids that will give you those skills and abilities that's required to go towards that field. And then, all right, so any other questions? Because we're down to almost the end. All right, so Daniel Gomez, who is also a career advisor here, he just put down the link for our career success guide. Thank you, Daniel. And so you can find that in the chat feature. So does anybody else have another question? Okay, you have 20 years of experience, great. And so my resume will be more than 2 pages. It really depends on the industry you're going into, because the thing about past experiences, and if you do a career change, it's very common to do career changes or have encore careers. But career changes is very common. But if your past experience is relevant to your current direction of career, then yeah, it might be a 2-page. But if it has nothing to do with it, that would go under other experience and you won't elaborate on it. So it won't take that much space, even though you get the work ethic aspect of it to say, hey, you know what, I have all these years of experience, but it really didn't relate to it. But there are ways of doing that. You're definitely a person that would want to schedule an appointment with your liaison. There is a career liaison for every single college. And let me go ahead and show you where that's at on our main website. I got stuck in my thing here. There we go. All right. My screen sharing is not happy today. All right, so if we go over to our main website, so if you go to the main website, here's where the virtual career cafe is. It also talks about our upcoming career fairs right here. But you could also go under students and you could find out exactly who the liaisons are and where we're, and the person that you should be contacting. The other thing that you could do is just about us is on here. And we're also listed here to meet the staff. So you can find out each person here, and you could also have our email addresses on here. So definitely take advantage of this, because that will allow you to know exactly who you're going to be contacting. And at that time, you could actually email us and schedule an appointment with us, especially with that 20 years of experience. So any other questions before we finish this webinar? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put my email address. So if you want a copy of this presentation, I will send the PDF copy to anyone who sends me an email. Just say PDF copy or resume presentation, and I'll be more than happy to email that to you. Oops, I just sent it to just us. Sorry about that. Let me send it to everybody. There we go. So go ahead and send me an email. I'll be more than happy to send it to you. Anyone who would like a copy. And thank you so much for attending, and keep an eye out for more webinars that's upcoming for this semester. And as I mentioned before, we will be having our career fair October 5th, 6th, and 7th. So definitely get your resume ready for that. And thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.